Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Got a good show for you today. We're keeping it a little light. Mr. Germany to Ukraine is a little under the weather today, so just me and Stanimir and Erlend. Maybe Colby will show up later. We'll see. But yeah, we do have a good show for you. Some stuff happened this week, so we'll do our best to cover it. If you could, please do hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to Tochnyi, helps us out, spreads the word. You can check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. We have an account there in those two places where we post some updates about what we're doing. And then, of course, we have our main website, tochnyi.info. That's where we post our in-depth articles and research from our researchers, interactive maps, and cool stuff like that. So check out the website, tochnyi.info. So it seems we might have a small technical issue.
It's gonna be fine.
Okay.
Few seconds.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know. Oh,
Yeah, it's loaded.
okay, good. Sorry everyone. We'll go ahead and start the news now. These are the main headlines as of February 1st, 2026. First up, we have operations. Satellite images from Planet Labs indicate that at least one fuel tank was fully destroyed during a Ukrainian drone strike on the Rosneft product oil storage in the Russian city of Penza. The attack occurred in the morning of January 23rd, with several blasts reported around 4 a.m. local time. People living nearby saw thick dark smoke and flames coming from the depot soon after. Analysis of the satellite photos suggests that additional nearby tanks might have also sustained harm, as scorching and burn traces can be seen beside them. The fire at the site continued for over 2 days, and analysts believe that the scale of the destruction makes normal activity in this base impossible. Penza is more than 500 kilometers from Ukraine's border. The Penza Neft Produkt facility belongs to Rosneft's network and plays an important role in supplying Russian forces in the occupied areas. The depot is one of the largest in the region and provides fuel for both civilian needs and for military units engaged in the war against Ukraine. The site includes 18 tanks for petroleum storage. Its overall storage volume is around 21,600 cubic meters, using vertical steel reservoirs of the RVS type. The base operates as a regional hub for transferring and distributing fuel, taking deliveries by rail and road. It is also linked to major oil pipelines along the Kuybyshev-Bryansk line, allowing it to receive supplies from the broader pipeline system. During the night of January 26th, Ukraine's defense forces carried out a drone strike on an oil refinery in the city of Slavyansk-on-Kuban in Russia's Krasnodar region. Regional officials acknowledged the incident and said that a fire started on the refinery's grounds. The Telegram channel Exile Nova Plus shared video to show the moment of the attack. The video depicts Russian service members trying to bring down incoming drones, followed by a large blast that illuminated the sky. Reports also indicate that a separate industrial site of an unspecified type was targeted around the same time. The Krasnodar Regional Operational Headquarters stated that emergency crews were working to contain the fires. Residents in the area said that flames spread to at least one tank used for storing fuel products. The refinery in Slavyansk-on-Kuban belongs to the Russian firm Slavyansk EKO and is designed to process roughly 5.2 million tons of crude oil per year. Analysts from Cyber Baroshna and Exile Nova Plus reported that 4 Ukrainian Flamingo cruise missiles hit the SKIF-M facility in Belgorod, a plant that produces precision tooling used in the manufacture of Russian Su-34, 35, and 57 aircraft. They claim that the strike took place on September 23, 2025, targeting a company that supplies equipment for building the combat jets. Satellite analysis later clarified that the missiles did not strike the Belgorod milling plant as initially assumed, but instead impacted the SKIF-M LLC. Images from the aftermath show the moment of impact and a subsequent fire at the site. According to the reported assessment, one missile is believed to have pierced the roof and wall of the structure and then exited the building before detonating outside. Photographs released by regional authorities after the incident indicate that fires broke out inside one of the workshops. Observers noted that the satellite image made public was captured after 3 of the 4 damaged roof areas had already been removed, apparently as part of preparations for rebuilding work. However, low-quality images taken by the Copernicus satellite service in early January 2026 show that roof restoration was still unfinished, suggesting that the interior of the facility may have sustained serious harm. Research by the Royal United Services Institute describes the SKIF-M as one of the sensitive points in the supply chain for Sukhoi aircraft production. The company specializes in drills, cutting tools, and inserts, and about 70% of its output is tailored for working with aerospace-grade materials. Its largest client is the United Aircraft Corporation. SKIF-M also operates a subsidiary called SKIF-MDV in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, officially registered a short distance from the Knaz factory, where the Su-35 and 57, as well as the Su-34 bombers are assembled. The Belgorod headquarters focuses on machine tools and composite parts for aircraft. Up next, we have economy and aid. A shipment of 76 emergency power generators from the European Union's strategic reserves arrived in Kyiv on Tuesday to help restore electricity in Ukrainian communities. Of the 447 units pledged by the European Commission, 300 have already reached Ukraine. The European Union's ambassador to Ukraine stated that the generators were part of the previously announced package of 447 units approved in response to severe cold weather in Ukraine in January, with a combined value of around 3.7 million euros. Some of the equipment is intended for areas close to the fighting. Through the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, more than 10,000 generators have been supplied to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion began. Ukraine's deputy minister responsible for community and territorial development stressed that cities and local communities affected by Russian strikes urgently need energy support. She said that generators provided by the EU will also be used by water utilities to power pumping systems. Distribution is planned across all regions, with particular focus on major urban centers, including Kyiv and Dnipro. Kyiv is expected to receive 2 additional high-capacity units that are still in transit. She added that Ukraine continues daily coordination with partners to secure further aid, especially generators. A senior representative of the Ukrainian Red Cross Society said that the organization is carrying out its support role for the country and welcomed the new phase of cooperation on generator supplies. He explained that working with the Civil Protection Framework and alongside the relevant ministry, additional collaboration on generator deliveries has already begun. Of the 76 units shown, most had already been unloaded and were being deployed. The United States finalized a $235 million deal with Belgium-based Sabena Aerospace Engineering to supply upkeep and logistical support for Ukraine's F-16 fighter fleet. The fixed-price contract includes mid-level and heavy maintenance for the jets and their engines, as well as supply management, and runs until January 28, 2029. All servicing under the agreement is set to take place at Sabena's site in Woluwe-Saint-Lambert in Belgium. The contracting body for the deal is the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, located at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. When the agreement was concluded, about $70 million in foreign military sales funding had already been committed. The Pentagon categorized the purchase as a non-competitive award, meaning the Belgian company was chosen directly rather than through a bidding process. The deal is part of the foreign military sales framework assigned to support Ukraine. S&P Global Ratings moved Ukraine's foreign currency credit score up from selective default to CCC+ on January 22nd after the country carried out a $2.6 billion debt exchange that delayed a large repayment for several years. This change means that for the first time since August 2024, Ukraine is no longer labeled as being in default on its foreign currency obligations. The selective default label had been applied because Ukraine did not make a $670 million payment due in June of 2025 on GDP warrants. These instruments were created during the 2015 debt crisis and were structured so that investors would receive higher returns if Ukraine's economy expanded, allowing creditors to benefit from a recovery. When the war severely affected economic growth and increased government spending needs, Ukraine was unable to meet the terms. To resolve this, holders of the GDP warrants agreed to swap them for more conventional bonds. The new securities carry fixed payment schedules and mature between 2030 and 2032. For each dollar of the old warrants, investors obtained $1.34 in new bonds, a trade-off that compensated for them for losing the growth-based gains and extending the timeline for repayment. As a result of the restructuring, Ukraine's annual foreign debt servicing needs fell from several $billion to around $1 billion per year over the next 3 years. No principal on foreign bonds must be repaid until 2029. This effectively gives Ukraine a 4-year period with lighter external debt pressure, allowing more state funds to be directed to defense instead of debt servicing. Together with a broader 2024 restructuring that reduced Eurobond debt by $9 billion, these steps have effectively postponed the country's most difficult repayment period by roughly 5 years. By the end of 2025, Ukraine's foreign currency reserves had reached a record $57.3 billion, strengthening its buffer for meeting obligations. National credit ratings affect how likely a borrower is to repay its debts. The earlier selective default status indicated that some repayments had been halted. A CCC+ rating signals high risk and vulnerability, but indicates that payments are currently being made. Up next, we have international relations. 14 European nations announced on January 26 that vessels operating in the Baltic and North Seas under shifting or unclear national registrations would be regarded as stateless as part of an action against Russia's shadow fleet. In a joint declaration, Germany, France, the Nordic and Baltic states, the Netherlands, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and Poland emphasized that ships are required to carry proper paperwork, stay in contact with authorities, and comply with maritime safety standards and international law. The countries stated that these new steps aim to protect and reinforce safety for shipping in the Baltic and North Sea areas. Their statement came shortly after French personnel boarded a tanker in the Mediterranean that was suspected of being part of the shadow fleet. The European coastal states also raised concern about increased interference connected to Russia affecting satellite navigation signals in the Baltic. They said such disruptions reduce the safety of maritime traffic and create risks for all ships. The statement called upon the global community to view interference with satellite navigation and manipulation of ship tracking systems as dangers to maritime safety and to work on backup options in case satellite signals are disrupted. Western officials have frequently cautioned that Russia has engaged in signal jamming and radar disruption along NATO's eastern border, which is widely seen as part of its hybrid tactics. Ukraine's president and Belarus's opposition leader met for their first dedicated bilateral talks on January 25th in Vilnius, Lithuania. She said she conveyed the support of Belarusians for Ukrainians and voiced admiration for Ukraine's leadership during the ongoing struggle for independence and sovereignty. Their discussions covered Belarusians who back Ukraine, including volunteers, civic activists, and underground supporters who have faced imprisonment because of their pro-Ukraine stance. They also reviewed the broader political climate in Belarus under the long-standing rule of its current authorities. Although the two have encountered each other before at international gatherings, such as during a prize ceremony for the Ukrainian president in Aachen in 2023 and at a European political community meeting in Copenhagen in 2025, the interactions before were brief. This meeting was the first time they sat down specifically for bilateral talks. The decision to formalize contacts came amid ongoing tensions in the region. Belarus continues to be used as a staging area for Russian aerial attacks against Ukraine. At the same time, human rights monitors have reported that as of the end of 2025, more than 1,000 people were imprisoned in Belarus for political reasons. The Belarusian opposition leader expressed appreciation to Ukraine's side for helping receive a recent group of freed Belarusian political detainees. In mid-2025, Belarus released 14 prisoners, among them her husband, who had spent 5 years behind bars. Their meeting also included discussion on possible future releases, additional sanctions against the Belarusian authorities, and ways to pursue responsibility for senior figures in the government and their associates. And last item this week. On January 29th, the U.S. president stated that Russia's president had accepted his appeal to refrain from striking Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities for a period of 1 week. He did not explain when or through which channel he had delivered the message, nor did he specify the starting point for the proposed halt. Speaking at a cabinet session, the U.S. leader said he had personally urged Russia's president to hold off on attacks against Ukrainian cities for 7 days, highlighting that Ukraine is enduring severe winter conditions. He described Moscow's response as positive. Ukraine's president expressed appreciation for the remarks, describing them as a meaningful signal regarding possible protection for Kyiv and other cities during the time of harsh cold. He said that the topic had come up during recent three-party discussions in the UAE and that it involved Ukrainian, U.S., and Russian representatives. Despite these comments, Russian forces carried out a strike on Kyiv during the night of January 28th, part of an ongoing campaign that has focused heavily on Ukraine's energy system during the freezing weather. According to Ukraine's Air Force, Russia launched more than 100 drones overnight on January 29th, with nearly 20 impacts recorded across different locations. Over the winter, strikes on Ukraine's power infrastructure have intensified, contributing to one of the most severe energy shortages Ukraine has faced. Media reports indicated that a temporary halt in Russian attacks could be linked to Ukraine holding back from targeting Russian oil facilities and tankers. The idea was reportedly discussed at a meeting in Abu Dhabi involving U.S., Ukrainian, and Russian officials. No public statement has followed, and preparations continue for another round of talks scheduled for February 1st. While discussions were underway in Abu Dhabi, Russia carried out a large combined assault involving hundreds of drones and missiles, with Kyiv as the main target. Attacks persisted throughout the week, including incidents that left many people injured in Odessa and another strike that hit a passenger train in Kharkiv Oblast on the same day. Russia deploys drones against Ukraine on a daily basis. Large coordinated waves of drones and missiles tend to happen once or twice per week. So just to further clarify, we have no direct confirmation that this ceasefire has actually occurred, but it's something that Trump mentioned. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment. Okay, so up next, we're going to talk a little bit with Stanimir about what's going on with the Russian economy. So, Stanimir, I got a couple of items for you first before we go to your general report. The first was about this airport, Domodedovo Airport, which is in Moscow, and it is one of the first major, I think, private airports in Russia, or was privatized in the 90s, and it became like a kind of a symbolic international gateway for international flights to Russia. During the full-scale invasion of Russia, it was nationalized, and then it since then has been, there was an auction for it, or they tried to sell it, and they listed the price as 1.7 billion US dollars, and basically nobody's going to buy it at that price. So now they're entertaining maybe about half of that price.
It was actually there was a successful bid by another one of Russia's private airports, another one from Moscow, actually, Sheremetyevo. One of their subsidiaries submitted a bid for 66.1 billion rubles, so that's a bit under $1 billion. I think somewhere around $880 million. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was a success story in the recent years, because one of the reasons why the initial price for 142 billion rubles was no one bid for it was because the airport also has a debt of around 70 billion rubles, so close to 1 billion. They paid less for it than the amount of debt it has. So if you take on the Domodedovo, you're taking on a lot of debt that the airport had gathered in recent years. And turning into state management didn't help either. One of the first things that the state did was started cutting salaries, which led to an exodus of workers from the airport. So one of the things that they have to fix is then they have to restaff those people that left. And that's hard to do in a competitive market like Moscow with its airports. But yes, it was nationalized last year. Putin said that it wasn't a nationalization because there were issues with its 1992, not 1992, but its issues with its privatization in the 90s. So of course the state was going to take it over, but it was in practice a nationalization. There is no way other to view it. I think last week also one of the owners tried to cancel the sale. He filed a claim against the nationalization, and the actual nationalization claim was that because he was owning the airport, in that way it had foreign ownership. So Russia right now has the ability to basically nationalize key infrastructure that has a parent company that is considered to be a foreign entity. So it could be a foreign parent company that's registered, for example, in Cyprus or in the Netherlands. Sometimes you can get away with it. Sometimes, like X5, you can't. Yandex got away with it, and it was resold. X5 was just terminated the ownership rights of the parent Dutch company. So it depends. But yes, Russia's nationalizing airports. And this was a big sale because it's one of the 4 major airports around Moscow. And it had been in the news that it's going to be sold at a high price. I think even the 66 billion is a bit too high because people were estimating, due to the debt and due to the issues the airport had in recent years, probably the price would be closer to 25 to 44 billion rubles. So somewhere close to 300 to 400 million dollars. Not so much as high as they offered for it. I know that part of the sale is a request from the government that they continue to invest in the airport. That is, the Sheremetyevo owners continue to invest in Domodedovo. And the other thing that we know is that the major Russian airline that operates out of Domodedovo, even though it moved most of its primary functions to Novosibirsk, the S7 airline is going to continue to invest in its center in Domodedovo, which is its main hub for Moscow.
So, Stanimir, I was a little unclear why. I guess like it kind of two questions is like one, my understanding was the nationalization itself, like it's a Russian-owned airport, but what you were saying about like Russians sometimes register international companies and have shell corporations and stuff that are in Cyprus, like that all kind of made sense to me. But like, what was the motivation for Putin wanting to nationalize this airport? That's the part I'm not totally clear on.
They're nationalizing almost everything that has a parent company that's outside of Russia. That's
okay, except certain companies, you're saying like Yandex can kind of just get away with it because they're too big or important. Yes. Okay.
No, I think Yandex got away with it because it had cooperated with the government for years to install in Russia what they call the digital gulag. So that's why, yeah, the Yandex owner was able to sell it, even not at full market value, but was able to get away and even retain part of the company, the international part of Yandex.
Got it. So this is like by default, if you did that little trick you were talking about where you registered a corporation in like Cyprus or wherever, you're now going to get nationalized or you're on the table to get nationalized. But certain companies have found a way to wiggle out of it, like Yandex. So I think that makes sense.
But it's rare. Yes.
Right.
But yeah, what they're doing is either nationalizing because of foreign ownership of a key infrastructure or forcefully ending the ownership. I don't know how to explain it. They're forcefully ending the parent relation of the company that's outside of Russia to forcefully relocate the company within Russia.
Right. So clearly they want to deter this behavior. Like, what is the motivation for that? I guess it's just to like insulate themselves from sanctions and things, or like what? Why do they want to do this? Nationalize everything?
They're doing it to key things like banks. They're doing it to also supermarket chains, which are large in Russia. For example, that's why X5. They're doing it to airports. And sometimes they're doing it to companies of officials who fell out of favor. But it's a way of retaining control of the economy directly because they can always replace the person in charge.
Putin and the people in his circle have decided like certain key industries like the airlines and grocery stores and things are, I don't know, like the state should have more control over them and more say in them. So we're going to do this. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and when you have the parent relationship from the company that's outside of Russia voided, you can then actually pressure the CEO who is inside of Russia and can't get out.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. They want like more control over the ownership and the general like institutions. Okay. I think that was all my questions about the airport. Is there anything else you want to say about the airport before we move to the next one?
No, I think we covered all of it. It's going to be an uphill battle to get it into the profitability that would merit the price they pay and would cover the expenses. Because when it was under the Russian state ownership, there were fears that it might default on its debt obligations. The issues are that big when it comes to managing it. So yeah, it's an uphill battle. And I think they did pay too much for it, but that was the lowest price in the second bid. They cut the price by 50% to start the second auction process.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for that. And so next topic, a little bit interesting. I basically am bringing this topic up to talk about the larger topic, which is there recently was a talk about how there is a show that's a big hit in Russia, and it was just a bit unexpected for me. This was kind of talked about a little bit on Western media, which is that there's a show called Heated Rivalry. It's a story of a relationship between two male hockey players. One is Canadian, one is Russian. I couldn't begin to tell you about the plot of this show or to analyze it in any detail, I'm not familiar with it. However, just reading it doesn't take a lot of media literacy, I think, to recognize that the Russian government doesn't want people watching this type of programming in Russia. As far as I know, there are laws on the books against this,
Yes.
distributing stuff like this.
Yes.
And yet, it seems to be very popular in Russia. So I think that gives us maybe an opportunity here to talk about how, like, Russia has clearly tightened their internet censorship regime since the full-scale invasion. But I mean, how effective is it really? Are Russians still consuming media that exists outside of the Russian filter, or has it been more effective? And this is maybe an anomaly. Stanimir, go ahead.
No, they've been trying a lot, but it hasn't been as effective as they want. Russians still consume media outside of Russia. I think last week the biggest story was that for a while you could get full-speed access to YouTube from Beeline, one of their telecoms. So that's people started switching to that telecom immediately. So they're looking for ways to consume foreign content, YouTube being one of the biggest. And what they're doing is mostly doing VPNs or adding to their sort of pirated online streaming services, shows that from the West that they like, before the government can react and start banning them, because you have to have a list of things you ban before the content managers start cutting things. So what they've done is they've tried to block VPNs. So from October of 2025, there were 258 VPN services that were banned. By January, they rose to 439, and they're continuously banning VPN services and protocols to limit the ability of people to look for Western media, even though it's not banned to have a VPN in Russia, but Roskomnadzor keeps shutting them down, even though it's supposedly not illegal. The only reason it's not illegal is because people need VPNs for their jobs, for the business sector, and for government jobs. So that's the only reason why they haven't banned VPNs altogether. They just need them. If they could, they would have banned VPN usage completely. It's even a bit of legally gray area when it comes to instructions on how to connect to a VPN. Those cannot be online, so you have to manage to connect on your own, or it has to be just a one-click service. So yeah, they've tried to make it as difficult as possible for people to get that information, and people are still getting it. Like we've seen with Max, the state messenger previously, where they tried to make everyone go to it, and then in the end, only percentages of the audience of the main channels that switched to Max actually migrated away from Telegram. So yeah, Russians don't want to use all these state-mandated programming, and they want to actually have access to the wider internet and content from it.
Yeah, I think that's a good like general summary of where we're at. Yeah, I think like Russia, it's not like China or certain other countries that have like really established regimes of media censorship. I think like, Russia, since the fall of the Soviet Union, has had a pretty like voracious consumption of like Western media, and probably media from other places too. But I'm just familiar with the Western media. Like it would be it's going to be a difficult habit, I think, for the Kremlin to try to break, is consuming Western media or foreign media. I don't know. Would you agree, Stanimir?
Yeah, and this week there was also an interesting case. 16-year-old Russian YouTube streamer actually killed Roskomnadzor senior official because they were blocking access to YouTube, and his audience decreased several times. So that's an actual case in Russia that happened. This is this is the extent to which Russians want to still have access to things like YouTube.
Yeah, so I think we'll just kind of keep an eye on that situation. It's still developing. I think, the Russians are still trying to figure out what exactly their internet censorship regime will look like. I don't think they want to go like as hard as Iran or North Korea, but they definitely, want something maybe similar to China, where they have like a sovereign internet, in their language sphere that's like subject to their dominion or something like that. But it's going to take a lot of like investment and expertise, I think, to get them there, and it's going to be a big ask culturally for the Russians to insulate themselves from the wider content sphere of the internet, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else about that before we move on?
Yeah, especially if you've tried RootTube and seen how buggy it is in long videos, you don't want to switch. Yeah, VK video is better, but people still don't want to switch all that much.
Yeah, I think like the Russians have always kind of envied the Chinese model of like just take what the West is doing and make a Chinese version of it, and kind of it will attract like it has a built-in market. But yeah, it's a little tougher for the Russians to actually do that in practice. But I think that's kind of what they strive to do. Okay, well, go ahead.
No, I'll just start with my segment now.
Okay, yep. So we'll start with the general report on the Russian economy this week. Go ahead, Stanimir.
Yeah. So the first important thing for everyone who used to follow the gasoline shortage, is that we might be in the prelude of another gasoline shortage. So refineries have been allowed to export gasoline from the 1st of February 2026. I initially posted that they had extended the ban till July, the end of July of 2026. However, they changed the story, and it turned out that the extension was only for resellers, not for primary producers like refineries. So what Russian refineries want to export is something like 25% of the total production, around 700 to 900,000 tons, multiply by 7.3, and you get the amount of barrels. But yeah, that's a considerable amount, given that it's close to 25-30% of the production of Russian refineries when everything is going smoothly and they're not having issues. So in February, the Kyiv refinery from Surgutneftgaz intends to export 111 tons of gasoline through the port of Ust-Luga. And the profitability of these refineries has been declining since November of 2025. In November, their profitability has fallen for gasoline by 40% to 8,000 to 9,000 rubles. So around 100 euros per ton. And by January, it had fallen to 7 to 7.5 thousand rubles per ton. When abroad, the netback is expected to be around $992 per ton for the highest exports. Usually from the Baltic ports, it's between 940 and 960 USD per ton. So the issue here is, however, that if they lift the ban on exports, and this continues till the summer, so it goes beyond February and March, they might enter the summer again with a very small reserve of supply for gasoline and risk another full-on major shortage. And the other thing is that because they've shifted the refinery maintenance periods, now they might get into the summer with all the refineries having to mandatory be in maintenance, because you can't push it indefinitely. So we're creating sort of a repeat situation of 2025, where earlier in the year they increased gasoline exports, and they entered the end of the summer without significant supply to be able to cover the demand peak in August and September, and then that progressed into October and November and December. So yeah, they haven't learned the lesson, and we might see another gasoline shortage of the same proportions this year as well. They just need the refineries just need the money badly, so they managed to strong arm the Russian Ministry of Energy. The other energy news that's major is that Lukoil signed an agreement with the U.S. investment company Carlyle for the sale of its international assets under Lukoil International GmbH. That, I think, is registered in Germany. However, this excludes the Kazakhstan assets, which will remain under Lukoil, because Lukoil can actually operate them in Kazakhstan and bring in things into Russia. Now it's up to the US if it's going to approve or reject the sale. I think they're going to approve it, given that Carlyle has had relations with the Trump administration. When it comes to agriculture, we had big news stories. The Russian agricultural equipment market for domestic sellers decreased by another 21.1% in 2025 to just 155 billion rubles. This is after a disastrous 2024, where they were forced to fire, at least the largest producer of agricultural equipment in Russia was forced to fire around 2,000 people at the end of the year, around April in 2025. And we know that further with the rising costs and the low sale prices, the profitability of Russian farmers who are the main purchasers of this equipment has dropped by 40 to 50% in 2020 to just 15 to 16% in 2025. Given the high interest rate, they cannot actually lease equipment, and they cannot take out loans to buy agricultural equipment because it doesn't fit in their profitability scheme. So we have some data for the different machinery. For the Bauer segment, there was a decrease of 36.7% in sales. Tractor deliveries fell by 31.1%. Grain cleaning machinery fell by 31%. Grain harvesters fell in sales by 30.9%. And when you look at imported machinery, which now is primarily Chinese, its sales dropped by 35%. And this is due to the increase in the recycling fee as a way to protect the Russian market from Chinese machinery, and also because there's a declining interest in Chinese brands. People want to use, again, the Western brands. But those are also more expensive and harder to get, and they have a specific quota for Western agricultural equipment that is not subject to the recycling fee, but you have to request a permit. And if you're in urgent need of machinery, you usually will not be able to get it. We also know that for the agricultural sector, in terms of grain exports, things this year are more difficult than in 2025. So for by the end of 2025 in Q4, the price to rent a grain carrier on the railway rose by 39% compared to the third quarter of 2025. And the price for delivery of grain from the center of Russia increased by 16.7%. They're expected that these two prices are going to increase by 22 and 14.3% respectively in 2026. And according to Rosagrotrans, the cost of transporting a ton of grain by rail from the center of Russia to the port of Novorossiysk increased by 36% in the fourth quarter of 2025. This is important because in terms of which regions are exporting grain this year, we have a change. Usually it was the southern regions, while the central part of Russia was supplying the rest of the country. It was rare for them to export grain, but because there was such a decrease in the amount of harvested grain in Russia's south, now it's the central part of Russia that's exporting grain, but because it's the distance is much greater, they're earning a lot less money than if it was the southern Russians who were exporting this grain. So Russian farmers are again getting squeezed because of this increase in prices in the cost to actually export. And the final big news, it's sort of a small news, but I think it's important that we had the first cut to the sign-up bonuses for the Russian army for 2026. The municipal government of Stavropol city decreased its sign-up bonus from 500,000 rubles. This is the part that's paid by the city. There's a second part that's paid by the region. So from 500,000 rubles from October 1st in 2025 to 400,000 rubles from February 1st of 2026. Now, part of the reason was that this would put them in line with the other districts of the Stavropol region, but it's still a cut nonetheless. And if you want to see a bigger cut, when it comes to people earning medals, they had a bonus of 1 million rubles, and they cut that to just 100,000 rubles, so a 10 times decrease. The final interesting story we have, or the final main story we have, is that Serbia's President Vučić announced that the Hungarian oil company MOL will purchase Gazprom's share of the Serbian oil company NIS for somewhere between 900 million and 1 billion euros. This is important because NIS is practically stopped working because of sanctions, and they have an extension only because it's currently under negotiation to be sold to MOL. Gazprom and Gazprom Neft combined own around 54% of the company, I think. and that makes it a subject to sanctions, and it has to be dealt with quickly. Earlier, Vucic was saying that they might even nationalize the company just to get out of sanctions and to continue to produce gasoline and diesel for the country. So that is another story where Gazprom's share within Europe is getting smaller and smaller. When it comes to banking, we have a few stories. So for 2025, the net profit of Tinkoff Bank, which is now called T-Bank after Tinkoff left the bank, rose by 83% to 112 billion rubles. And the bank is managing roughly around 6.4 trillion rubles in clients' assets. These increased by 19% in 2025. Tinkoff is probably Russia's most successful after Alfa Bank private bank. Even though its owner left the bank, it was probably one of the first digital banks in the world. That was their claim to fame and innovation. Then we have Russia's state-owned bank VTB. They own 50% plus one share. It's planning to increase its net profit in 2026 by 150 billion, from 500 billion rubles to around 650 billion. They still have a lot of assets to sell because they're sort of like an investment bank. So if profits for banks stay the same as they were in 2025, I think they're going to manage to hit that target with a few sales. The final news is for Raiffeisen Bank, which still operates a Russian subsidiary. And unlike in 2024, when they had a huge profit of 873 million euros, in 2025, the company reported that its Russian subsidiary had a loss of 86 million euros after taxes. This is mainly because of the court cases that it lost, where it had to pay hundreds of millions of euros to Russian companies that took it to court in Russia. And the Russian central bank automatically seized enough assets so that it can acquire that payment immediately. So when it comes to commodities, we have a few stories. For metals, we have that Russia's largest nickel producer, Norilsk Nickel, decreased its nickel production in 2025 by 3% to 109,000 tons. Its copper production decreased by 2% to 425,000 tons, and its palladium production decreased by 1% to 2,725,003 ounces. We have a story from the coal sector. The export of coal that was mined in the Russian Far East grew by 3.3% to 30 million tons. The biggest increase came from two fields, the Elginskoye in Yakutia, with 5.7% to 19.1 million tons, and the Urgalskoye in Khabarovsk, where it increased by 30% to 7.4 million tons. For these coal mining operations that are in the Russian Far East, it's much easier for them to get to the ports, a lot less in terms of cost for delivery compared to, for example, the Kemerovo region, that is the Kuzbas, or from further west. So for them, it's still profitable to export coal, especially if it's coking coal. I think that's the case with the Yakut coal deposit. So they are still profitable, unlike a lot of others in Russia. When it comes to oil and gas, the Indian oil and natural gas minister said on an energy conference that the country had reduced its oil imports from Russia by 28% due to new sources, and it dropped from 1.8 million barrels to 1.3 million barrels per day. Now, when it comes to interesting data points this week, I have several stories. So first we have with Rostat, to see how they massage the data when it comes to inflation. They included flights to Dubai as part of the regular expenses for Russians when calculating inflation. I don't think that's something that most Russians do. Only a fraction can afford to fly to Dubai. This is something that I don't think should be included at all in the way they calculate inflation, but this is some of the ways they can use to actually reduce how inflation is looking in the country. Also, when it comes to Russian airlines, the flights that had a delay over 3 hours rose by 100%, from a share of 2% to a share of 4% in 2025. And the flights that were delayed by over 4 hours doubled again, from 1% share to 2% share. And this is mainly due to Ukrainian drone attacks over Russian cities. because during those, Russia closes the airlines, closes the airports, and they cannot take off until all drones are destroyed. So this is what's causing growing problems for the Russian airline industry. We also had the Russian sales of beer and similar products like cider, puree, and meat fell by 9.3% compared to 2024. And we had the Russian passenger car fleet shrunk in 2025 for the first time in 20 years. The decrease was by 0.18% to 52.8 million cars. When we come back to the Russian production of ethanol, again linked to Russian alcohol consumption, it decreased by over 10% to 76.49 million decaliters. And the main reason for this is the decrease in the production of vodka and high inventory at the end of 2024. Now, finally, when it comes to inflation and debt, the inflation for the week from the period of the 20th to the 26th of January came in at around 0.19%. This is still high for the Russian government, especially for the Russian central bank. So we might see a pause of the rate decrease that's been happening over the last few months. So for the first 26 days of January 2026, the inflation is 1.91% versus 1.11% in 2025. So it's still close to double what it was in 2025, and I don't see how we see a rate reduction with that data coming in. But Nabiullina might surprise us. Finally, when it comes to debt auctions, they held again 2 auctions. The first one was for 59.6 billion rubles. The interesting thing here is that the yield came at around 15.06%. So we're again seeing Russian debt yield rising over 15%, something that we haven't seen in the last several weeks. And the second auction, which was smaller for 18.9 billion rubles, the yield was again close to 15% at 14.89%. And I think this is it for this week when it comes to Russian news. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Stanimir. So yeah, I think that's it for the report on the Russian economy this week. As always, we'll stay tuned every week for Stanimir's reports. Stanimir, I think you got to get going pretty soon, right? You won't be here for the Q&A?
I might make it. We are quick this week.
Okay, cool. So next topic, I just really quick wanted to cover some other stuff we were going to talk about this week. The first is just, I mentioned this in my news report, but it's a pretty big deal. That's why I made it the title of the episode, that Ukraine got a big breakthrough in negotiations with their creditors. I don't know. I think this was bigger news than people made it out to be this week. A lot of other stuff is going on. I get it. But yeah, this is a really big deal. It was important for Ukraine. Basically, they had 2 big financial albatrosses hanging on their neck. The first was a $50 billion US dollar budget deficit in their government budget, and the other was they had some unresolved credit problems that were they weren't able to meet the obligations of. So it's a really big deal that first the EU passed a $90 billion program for 2 years. They can live with 45 billion, 50 billion would have been better. But so that sort of solves the budgetary crisis for the next 2 years. And then this renegotiation of their debt basically solves the problem for about 5 years. They still are going to have some pretty difficult economic circumstances or like credit issues down the road, but they're not going to acutely impact Ukraine's ability to conduct, defensive operations on their territory. So it's a big deal. It's good news. And yeah, I don't know. I think Europe needs to maybe think about resolving the budget crisis more long term. But with this situation, the Ukrainian government can continue to defend itself for the next 2 years without worrying about any kind of like major budgetary collapse. So it's good news. You guys want to say anything about that, or we can move to the next topic?
It sounds like good news.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just something I've been keeping my eye on for a long time. First, my big hobby horse was the $45 billion budget deficit, which was resolved, and then my next hobby horse became this credit issue, which has been resolved. So just good news all around. Next topic, of course, is the Starlink stuff. This is something Erlend and I have been talking about for years, and I mean other organizations have talked about for years regarding Starlink. So I would say like the origins of this are maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when we heard reports of the Russians using Starlink, and the response at that time from Starlink was, well, we can't really restrict, like if a Russian buys a Starlink system registered from a fake country or under a fake name or what have you, and it's used in Ukraine, we have no way of telling a Ukrainian volunteer unit Starlink from a Russian, volunteer unit Starlink, basically, or Russian, informally purchased Starlink. So that was good.
And then on top of that, what they said officially was that they restricted it with geofencing, right? But the geofencing is not very precise, so that means that there are areas of coverage are kind of overlapping with the areas that are not supposed to have coverage.
Right. Yeah. The geofencing wasn't precise enough for them to just like take the front line and go, okay, this is Ukraine and this is the Russian side, and no drones over there, etc. It was too chaotic. So basically, a technological solution didn't exist. That's kind of what we were told by our own people who are more knowledgeable about Starlink, and that's something that Starlink was saying when this issue first arose. And actually, it got to the point where U.S. Congress was interrogating members of the corporation about this issue. So, I mean, Starlink was well aware of the issue, but they were kind of insisting that there wasn't a technological solution that they could implement that would resolve it. Since then, I don't know. I think me and Erlend have been of similar minds that there are ways to deal with this problem, but they're administrative. You would need to basically register every Ukrainian Starlink, and then any Starlink that isn't part of the registered network that is active in Ukraine would be, shut down or restricted or what have you. Go ahead, Erlend. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways of going about this, but the end result is essentially having a whitelist of terminals that are allowed to operate by Starlink in the let's call it the conflict zone. So that meaning Ukraine, Russia, the Black Sea, everywhere along the front lines, of course. And there are many means of getting to a whitelist, but they seem to have chosen a very direct way where basically you have to be inserted on a whitelist by the Ukrainian government.
Right. So yeah, this was, I think, a big administrative challenge. Basically, Starlink was saying either you guys need to give us a list of every single Starlink system in Ukraine that you're currently using, or we can't help you, something like that. And I would say the issue kind of went away for a while. I don't really know why. I think it just became more of a background issue. And until more recently, when the Russians started using Starlink at scale in like more drones, and they started using them, I guess, like in different ways. Erlend, would you describe that way?
Yeah. So we've seen for a very long time. So these are actually not the late, the BM-35 is the drone that kind of spiked this, that made the Ukrainians go full panic mode about this. But they've been using Starlinks on other drones for a while, and also in the closest time periods of the last few months, we've seen a lot of Starlinks attached on Molniya drones. Molniya drones are very rudimentary, let's call it fixed wing FPV drones. And obviously, Starlink is very difficult to jam. So that makes reaching the target a lot easier. And also, you'll have a much higher bitrate transmission. So that means you can have higher resolution video and transmit much more data. You can use you can essentially use it also as a relay drone for other drones. So you can equip, let's say, a BM-31 like this one with radio equipment and fly it in circles around a target, and then other drones that don't have Starlink on them but are able to reach the area can connect to that drone and the network. Like, you basically create a mesh network, or translate the signal via radio frequency and use it as a relay drone, and that makes jamming and countering these drones much more difficult.
Right. So we've seen, I guess, like increased and more creative and effective uses of Starlink integrated drones by the Russians. And so it became like an issue of discussion again. The Ukrainians raised this issue with SpaceX. And this time we saw, like, I would say, a more proactive response. SpaceX basically, instead of kind of throwing their hands up and saying, we can't solve this, they appear to have like been very responsive this time, and they've managed to, according to the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian MOD, which has said that they've been very like cooperative and responsive to this request, have they managed to effectively limit Starlink control by the Russians, the ability for the Russians to use it. They've done this in two ways, as far as we understand. The first way is, for sure, this is something the Ukrainian MOD said, they're giving Starlink a list of registered Starlinks that the Ukrainians are using. They're providing that to SpaceX, and then that's the whitelist that Erlend was talking about. I think this is a much bigger task than is being let on here. There's countless volunteer units in Ukraine, and lots of them are buying Starlink service like informally, right? So it must have been a big administrative task to get this whitelist assembled and provided, but the Ukrainians managed to do it. And then the other thing is that there appears to be, and this I'm not sure is directly confirmed by anyone, but basically if you're in Ukraine and you're driving too fast, more than 75 kilometers, Erlend, they'll restrict it. Is that right?
Yeah, there's numerous reports of Starlinks that are mounted on vehicles, because that Ukrainians does that all the time. They have special mounts that you can buy for Starlinks with magnets and put them on the roof of a car. And when they're driving above 75 kilometers an hour or something to that sort, somewhere around there, then if they're not on the whitelist, they will be disconnected.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the fix that Starlink has put in place. It's a pretty straightforward fix. I think the real issue before was the whitelist, and there does appear to have been a tangible shift in attitude of SpaceX. I think SpaceX was a little more dismissive of the problem before, and this time they seem to have been more responsive. And that might have to do with, or like I will posit a speculative theory, that we have a new minister of defense in Ukraine, and that guy is the former minister of digital transformation. Seems like a very tech savvy guy, a very data driven guy, and this looks to me to be one of the first litmus tests of his effectiveness. And it appears that he passed with flying colors. If this was his doing, I think he's done a great job here in kind of shifting the priorities of SpaceX or what have you. That said, we don't know for sure. It was either a new strategy by the Ukrainians to get SpaceX to do something, or it was a change in attitude of SpaceX or possibly the owner Elon Musk about the whole situation that led to this change. But personally, I believe that the new defense minister had something to do with it. I think the timing is just a little too coincidental. Personally, Erlend, do you have any thoughts on it though?
Yeah, I think the obviously the new Minister of Defense is probably also it's probably easier for him to get on waves length with Elon Musk. So that could have been a factor into this. And who knows why Elon suddenly, and it seems like Elon has confirmed publicly that they were going to fix this very quickly as well. And we've never seen that in the past, and there's been numerous times from the very beginning, when we saw the first Starlink terminals pop up on the Russian side, there's been a lot of drama and debate about this, and never seen any comments from Elon Musk before this. So who knows? Maybe it's a personal thing. But one thing is for sure is that there's been a lot of debate in Ukrainian circles about all the Starlink terminals that are not on the Ukrainian books, because what happens in Ukraine is that there is a certain number of terminals and subscriptions that are on the Ukrainian military. Basically, they've either bought them themselves or they've been donated through military assistance to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and they are on this whitelist now. But there is also enormous amounts of Starlink terminals that have been donated or bought directly from units. And how they will be on the whitelist is kind of a question mark in the future. And I think that that is going to be a challenge to solve, but not a challenge that is impossible to solve. And the good thing about this is that when you've accomplished to create an extensive whitelist, then you could possibly actually block out all Russian Starlink use from the front lines, which would make a big impact.
Yeah, and it seems to me like they had a good compromise or good approach to this. I don't know if it was SpaceX's idea or the Ukrainians, but as an example, right? If, let's say you're a volunteer medical, service provider in Ukraine, you've got a Starlink, right? You're not registered with the Ukrainian government, but you spend some time around the front lines, trying to get people out or help them medically, etc. You're not on this white list. It would be impossible for the Ukrainian government to find every little organization that has a Starlink. But if you're not going 75 kilometers an hour, then it's not a big problem for you, right? So this is like a good solution that targets exactly the problem that they have, which is that they're being put on these fast drones, and that it won't impact negatively the people who aren't using it but didn't quite make it on the whitelist. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but I don't see any reason for not expanding this program now that it's already in place. Ukraine has a very good, governmental digitalization. They have government platforms, military platforms that the military has access to, and somehow incorporating a 2FA, like a two-factor authentication method that you need to update every week or every second day or something to connect your Starlink shouldn't be that difficult. So I think that creating a more extensive whitelist that wouldn't impact volunteers and also the privately donated and paid for Starlinks it's not impossible. Obviously, you need to dedicate quite a lot of resources to such a program, but I think that the benefits are much greater than the efforts that you need to put into it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a good solution. It seems like Starlink is satisfied with the solution in terms of they feel like it's not disrupting their service, providing their service to who they want to provide it to. But yeah, as you said, I think with a more sophisticated administrative approach to register everything and set this up properly, you could go further with this program and limit Russian use of Starlink to further their invasion of Ukraine even more. And hopefully they'll do that. It seems like the Minister of Defense, this is on his radar, and this is something that hopefully will continue.
Yeah, and Ukraine is a huge client for Starlink. Obviously, there's a enormous amount of terminals that are donated by both state actors and non-state actors, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine is the absolute dominating user base of Starlink. Okay, I know that Stanimir has something that is kind of connected to this, so I guess we can move on to that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, there is a company in Russia. It's part of the X holding. It's called Bureau 1440, and it was the Russian attempt to build an analog to Starlink. They were planning in 2025 to launch 16 low orbit satellites to start offering their service. They plan to invest 329 billion rubles, so something like close to 5 billion rubles. That's on top of 102 billion rubles from the Russian federal budget. And the plan was to get this operational by 2030. They've missed their deadline for launching in 2025. They're going to try to launch in 2026, 156 satellites, in 2027, 292, and 318 in 2028. So for now, the hope is that they manage to fail all of these launches, and Russia doesn't have an equivalent to Starlink, but this is what they're working on. This is their attempt to actually have their own domestic system. It's ambitious, but it's also reliant on the Russian space industry, which for them is probably a bad thing because Russian space industry hasn't been working as great as they would like the last several years, if I can say that.
Yeah, I think this might impact SpaceX's thinking a little bit, that Russia is actively trying to create like a competitor to their service, and that I think the Russians are very clearly reacting to the attempts to restrict their use of Starlink. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's relevant. Okay, well, I think we just got a couple of questions in the chat. Chat, if you have any questions, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Usually I do. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in chat. We'll stick around for a little bit and try to answer all your questions. So the only one I see, I see a couple this week, but there's one that says, are there any reliable reports of U.S. relaxed sanctions regarding Belarus that have benefited Russia? So not a super expert in this, but as far as I know, no. First off, like Belarus does have a history of being a so-called third country that the U.S. labels as like Russia uses them as transit points to bypass sanctions. They've done this for like microchips and certain other things in the past. And they've done that through like Belarusian companies and oligarchs. And they've also used Belarus to like export certain things by like, exporting timber and like changing the label from Russia to Belarus and things like that to avoid complication, either sanctions directly or usually complications from sanctions. So Belarus has been used for bypassing sanctions by Russia. However, as far as I understand, the recent restrictions that were lifted on Russia were lifted on an airline company and
Yes.
like a potash company.
And if I can add something, I can add something here. The biggest issue for Russia was the airline company because Russia can get, the idea was that Russia might be able to get spare parts for airplanes that it can use domestically, just buy them through Belarus because of the lifting of that limitation. But I think because there was a recent story in Russia about planes that had been grounded for a while that still had a few 100 hours in them to be used were being sought after by several companies. So I think currently the situation is such that we don't have any data that would suggest Belarus has been used to successfully sanction avoid. More that we might think that it's the opposite, that they have failed to use this restriction on Belavia that's been lifted. They have failed to use it to import significant amounts of spare parts for their airplanes, Western airplanes, that is. So yeah, I think right now there's no signs that the initial lifting of sanctions on Belarus has had that much of a positive effect on Russia, at least for the key industries. Yeah, it seems like whoever was talking to Donald Trump from the Treasury Department got this right. He figured out, or they figured out a way to help Belarus a little bit, to give them an incentive to cooperate without directly benefiting Russia in any meaningful way. This potash stuff, I don't think benefits Russia really directly.
but it does help Belarus a bit. And then this airline stuff, I would assume, kind of as Stanimir was saying, that they're worried. Like, airline parts are easy enough to track, that if this airport did actually or airline actually did like violate the sanctions, they'd be in pretty big trouble, and it'd be pretty easy to figure that out versus like sneaking in a suitcase of microchips or something. An airline engine's a little tougher. So I think overall the US was like careful to try to lift sanctions that would help Belarus but not directly help Russia. And I think they mostly succeeded in that. I'm sure a little bit of funny business is going on, but this hasn't increased the funny business meaningfully from what we can tell. Okay, next question. Whitelisting of Ukrainian government registered Starlink terminals and blocking of every other terminal around the contact zone is a straightforward solution. Why did it take so long? I think Erlend and I are of like two slightly different minds about this, but I think that ultimately we agree. We just like see it from different angles. I would describe my position as it was a big administrative task for the Ukrainians to provide a whitelist to SpaceX. I'm not suggesting that SpaceX was particularly cooperative before. I think they were throwing up their hands. That said, I think that it was a bigger administrative challenge than some people care to admit to like create this whitelist. But I think Erlend would lean more towards Starlink dragging their feet on it. Erlend, what do you think?
Well, I think that it's probably a composed issue, and it's really difficult to know exactly why this decision hasn't been made earlier. But we know that also the Ukrainians, or at least Ukrainian soldiers, have been worried about doing this in the past, just for the reason that we mentioned, that it's difficult to create a database of all the Ukrainian Starlinks when some are paid for by the military and some are, or maybe even the majority are paid for by volunteers and the soldiers themselves. And I don't know if that is the reason, but I feel that there's been a passive and not proactive approach from SpaceX itself when it comes to this issue. It's a difficult question to answer. Let's say it like this.
Yeah, I think the truth is somewhere between like the administrative challenge of it and SpaceX's indifference or intransigence or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, something happened that moved the two sides from those positions, and now we're seeing movement on the issue, which is a good thing. So I think that's the best we can do. I think that we would mostly agree with the person who asked the question. Like we've been saying for years, like something needs to be done about this. So and that it could be done. So we're glad to see it happen, and we definitely think it should have happened sooner. But I think that if you wanted to like name reasons, those are probably the two main reasons.
Yeah, and seems to me a little coincidental that they found a solution now, but maybe it also was because of urgency.
Yeah, I'm not sure what changed, but it does seem like something clearly changed, which is good. And we're glad whatever changed. Okay, thank God Colby's here to answer this one. Colby, any updates on Aster 30 missile productions and whether Ukraine's getting more? Ballistic missiles have decimated Ukraine, and PAC-3 delays by the US are major problems.
So I relying on our colleague and my friend Fabian Hoffman's research and analysis here. He estimates that Aster 30 Block 1 and Block 1 new tech production for this year is probably going to be somewhere around 230 to 270 missiles produced by MBDA France, which is far less than half of what PAC-3 MSE production currently is. And PAC-3 MSE production is going to rise considerably still in the years to come, including this year. And I don't know if MBDA has provided any sort of updates or forecasts for what they want to produce beyond this year. But those are the figures that Fabian had calculated for what he expected that they would achieve in 2026. So it's Astra 30 is not going to ever be a very significant portion of Ukraine's available interceptors for BMD, because a lot of these missiles are spoken for already by France and UK and other European customers. So the available production for Ukraine is probably going to be pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things. So Patriot remains the far more important missile. Patriot deliveries to Ukraine have actually improved lately. I'm pretty sure I said this on the stream maybe a couple weeks ago or last week. I forget. Whenever I was on last, I think I may have mentioned this, that I have heard that deliveries of both PAC-3 and AMRAAM and other missiles has actually improved as of late. So Ukraine has received some. That problem, it's always going to be a problem. Ukraine's never going to get to a point where they're not worrying about this. And as I always say, like, the fundamental problem here is just the whole approach of trying to equip them with missile defense rather than giving them offensive precision fires to take the fight back to Russia, because that's the only way that the war is going to have a favorable outcome for Ukraine. They're not going to win this war by just defending better. They need to take the fight back to Russia. So there needs to be a very big shift in the way that the problem is conceived of in Western capitals, and we still have not gotten there. With Berlin, Germany still not providing Taurus. There's been recent reporting that there may be some opposition from France to increasing deliveries of cruise missiles to Ukraine, if that reporting is to be believed. So we still have a long way to go here in changing sort of the discourse and among political leadership to really address the problem. Because even with the massive ramp up of PAC-3 MSE production that's going to be getting going, and I wrote a piece about this for Defense Archive, so you can go check that out if you're interested in learning about that. That still wouldn't solve the problem for Ukraine. Even with PAC-3 MSE production tripling, that still won't solve the problem. So Ukraine needs offensive weapons, not just defensive weapons.
Yeah, I mean, like, to put it into perspective, like, I think at least once a week, Russia's throwing an attack at Ukraine with like 500 or more objects, in the sky. So with the production levels of anti-air defense that are currently produced, I don't, it's never going to be possible to stop it. So I think the only reasonable answer is that Ukraine needs to be given, as you said, like, better offensive capabilities. And in theory, that should be able to either ultimately end the war or stop them from shooting missiles at Ukraine, or at least establish some level of deterrence so that, Russia thinks twice about actually striking Ukrainian facilities. But
and on top of this, I think that the unfortunate situation where Trump, asks Putin to have a ceasefire against Kyiv and some other major cities for the rest of January is not going to have a positive effect, because it's basically a green light to continue to strike civilian targets and strategic objectives like electricity generation and heat generation, etc. in Ukraine, which is very unfortunate in my opinion. Obviously, it's good for Ukraine that there may be a couple of days with no strikes on Kyiv or and other main cities, but it's not good.
Yeah, I agree. I think that these little ceasefires that the U.S. has been trying to arrange since the new administration has tried to achieve peace have been pretty unproductive. They never seem to go anywhere. I would say the Russians and the Ukrainians, to some degree, sometimes agree with them in principle, but then when are asked about the specifics of how to implement it in this really complex frontline situation and dealing with all these other factors, they never seem to actually be put into practice. And then, yeah, I don't think Russia really has a problem like saving up. Okay, they have a ceasefire for a week. They get some PR from that. They get into Trump's good graces from that, and they just save up more missiles for the next week, and then they can throw more at once. Like Russia's already saving missiles to use in these big attacks. So, because the idea is you want to save up enough missiles so that you can throw them all at once, so that you've only got so many interceptors in Ukraine, and then you overwhelm the air defense, right? So, yeah, these little temporary ceasefires are never really going to solve the problem. I think the good news is if sometimes Trump says, "Hey, I want you to stop blowing stuff up in Ukraine because it's cold," and then Putin either says yes and then doesn't do it, or says no, theoretically that might move the needle on whatever weird graph Trump has in his mind about whether or not Putin can be trusted, and is honestly trying to end this war. But who knows how much of an effect stuff like that has on him, really. It's all very opaque when it comes to like his personal beliefs about these things. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that the ceasefires aren't going to be any kind of meaningful solution. Okay, so do we want to address that? I don't know enough about Aster stuff. Do we want to address that other Aster thing?
What's the question?
So I'll just ask it. So someone wrote, I would imagine that Aster production ramps up if Ukraine is getting 8 SAMP-T NG systems starting this year. Does France have any plans to increase their production, I think is the bottom line?
As I said, I don't know what MBDA's long-term production targets are. I haven't gone and searched for it. I was referring to some material that Fabian had written, which is a few months old. And so he was just speaking about what the plans had been leading up to this current year. So I don't know what the production ramp looks like. As far as what Ukraine's getting, I have no information about Ukraine getting 8 SAMP-T new generation systems starting this year. I must have missed that. I don't know. Have you guys seen that? Because I'm not familiar with that commitment. So I would ask the questioner to send us where they're seeing that, because I haven't seen that reporting about that commitment being made by either France or Italy. I would be very surprised by that, given that production of those new systems has been going very slowly. I believe the Italian military is just receiving their first fire unit right now, and deliveries are expected to continue for like next 5 years or something like that. So I don't believe that is correct, but again, I may have missed it. So if anybody has any information about 8 systems being promised to Ukraine, send it over to us.
I have not seen any announcements from Italy or France to this regard. But what I have seen is speculation.
So I don't know anything.
Yeah, no. So the only speculation I've seen is that the money from the European loan is going to be used to buy more SAMP-T systems for Ukraine. But I think that's very far from official.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if France wants to use all that money to buy a bunch of SAMP-T systems for Ukraine. But as far as like a delivery schedule, like I don't see either France or Italy being willing to give Ukraine spots in the queue to get those systems sooner. Like what's far more likely to happen is that France and Italy continue to divest their old SAMP-T systems as the NG systems get delivered to them. Like that's the more realistic thing that might happen. But again, like the fundamental problem there is that the missile production is still quite bottlenecked, and SAMP-T is just the legacy SAMP-T system is just really not particularly good at BMD because the radar that it uses is severely underpowered. So even with the current Block 1 missile having pretty good kinematics, it's just like totally crippled by having a very weak radar. So it's a very, very small defended footprint with that legacy system.
Yeah, the SAMP-T NG is I think it's new generation SAMP-T it stands for. Yeah, and I think the launcher is the only component that is more or less unchanged, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Patriot, where you have these, improvements to the system where like it's almost effectively a totally different system because a lot of the key components are different. So I believe that there's a new like fire control unit, new radars. Obviously, different operators will have different radars. Like France is using a new Grandmaster radar, I guess, and I think Italy is using a Kronos radar for theirs, both of which are significantly more advanced. The missile is obviously improved as well. So it's similar to like with the US going from PAC-3 to PAC-3 MSE, and then upgrading the radars, going from the legacy radars to the new LTAMs and getting IBCS. So it should be a fairly significant improvement in capability. That said, it's still not proven at all. It hasn't been used in combat, so we don't really know what the performance is. It's all just pretty speculative at this point in time. But I feel confident. I mean, it's pretty widely understood that the missile as is, the B1 missile, is like a good missile. It's just that, again, the radar was a huge weak point for the system. So, if I was France and Italy, I would want to get some of these new radars into Ukraine so that it could be demonstrated what the capabilities of the system are. But I don't know. We have to wait and see what Macron and Maloney, along with MBDA, are interested in doing with that.
Yeah, I see that Thierry is saying, what I heard as a French is that Ukraine with at least one SAMP-T NG into 2026, but not heard of 8 in 2026. So maybe there is some French announcement that we have missed.
Again, I mean, I haven't seen that. So if you have either an announcement from the French government or any reporting on this, I would be very interested in seeing it. And it's entirely possible that I've just missed it because I have really not been paying attention very closely to the news as of late. So entirely possible. So as always, please do send us information that you see on that.
Just tag Colby on X, and then he'll probably follow up.
Yeah, thanks for the update on SAMP-T, guys. I think that was like a good illustration of where we're at with that. So other question was about Nightfall. A lot of questions about foreign military assistance programs today. Any updates on the UK initiative for Nightfall and providing Ukraine with long-range capabilities? So if I remember correctly, Nightfall is a ballistic missile that is launched from the ground. Is that correct?
I believe it's a.
I think it's supposed to be platform agnostic.
Yeah, but I think it's an attempt to create a cheaper, I would say, long-range rocket artillery rather than ballistic missile. Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, rocket artillery. I mean, they are ballistic missiles. They're just scaled down essentially, right? Like Gimler's is effectively a ballistic missile, but it's very much shorter range and lower payload. So I'm just pulling up the specs now of what the UK MOD announced. So 200 kilogram warhead, more than 500 kilometers. So that's like, in terms of range, comparable to Prism, but in terms of payload, that would be actually 200 kilometers. We don't know officially what the warhead weight for Prism is, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably like in the same ballpark probably of what Prism would offer. But
the range is definitely like an SRB
yeah.
range.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the UK government, UK.gov at least, calls it a tactical ballistic missile. So that's where I went with it. But I agree, like a lot of the distinctions between rocket and missile and ballistic and so forth can be very technical. So I'm sure it sounds like this one is small, which doesn't feel right.
TBM is fine. It's correct nomenclature. Yeah, I mean it's a ballistic missile, absolutely. I think that I mean this was just announced like a few weeks ago, so nobody should be expecting anything from this. I mean, like we want to develop a new missile, right? So this is not again, file this under things that should have been done 4 years ago now, right? Yeah. Like why is this being done 4 years ago? If this was done 4 years ago, this would already be in full rate production. But because it's been done now, Ukraine won't see any benefit from this, like in any meaningful amount of time. Like the war will be over probably, for better or for worse, by the time this could appear on the field. Like it takes a very long time to develop a ballistic missile from scratch. This is not something that the United Kingdom has. I don't know if they've ever built. Has the United Kingdom ever fielded a indigenous conventionally armed tactical ballistic missile? If they have, it's probably been a very, very long time. No systems come to my mind offhand. So this is totally uncharted territory. Their defense industry does not have any sort of institutional knowledge about programs like this. So this is not something that I would expect is going to be delivering any sort of return on investment in a very long time.
I mean, they say that the first 3 missiles should be tested within 12 months. So I guess we can come back to this question in a year.
Yeah, that's a super ambitious timeline. So if they can do that, then full power to them. Yeah, I'd be surprised. I don't know if this has only gone out to UK industry. Like if it's open to anybody, then yeah, that's realistic. Like American companies or other companies can bid on this and just offer like systems that they already have in development or have developed for this requirement. So I guess it depends on who this is open to. If they're trying to do this indigenously in the UK, then I would be stunned if they could do it within 12 months. If it's open to American industry and American companies like Castilian or others, some of the newer primes, new entrants in the marketplace, if they can bid on this, then yeah, 12 months would be a lot more realistic.
Yeah, so I mean, Ukraine is, or sorry, UK. I think I just combined Ukraine and UK. Ukraine is cooking up a lot of different missile projects. I think with there's going to be some winners and there's going to be some duds, but we'll try to keep track of them all and keep appraised. And as we said, the goal is to have something fielded in 12 months. So I guess we'll see in 12 months if they have anything to show. Okay, any other questions we didn't cover, Erlend?
I think we went through them all.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for your questions, chat. So I think we've covered everything for this week. Bit of an eventful week, but yeah, we'll keep everyone appraised of the main headlines. I know a lot's going on in the world. We appreciate everyone sticking by to follow what's going on in Ukraine. I think it's still a really important issue. So, of course, thank you to our illustrious panel. Appreciate you guys always stopping by and providing your immense expertise, especially Stanimir and Colby, and, of course, Erlend. And thank you, of course, to our chat. We appreciate you guys giving us feedback and asking questions. It helps us orient ourselves in the information space. Yeah, thanks to everyone watching the video later. You guys can always put stuff in the YouTube comments. We do our best to read all those. So yeah, thanks for everyone's participation and support and all that. And we'll see everyone next week, 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
On behalf of the brave.